look at the violence that we've had. Look at the violence we have recently.
Right, but when you say bedlam, what do you mean?
I think you have bedlam. I think you look at Joe Biden, it's bedlam. You have a man who can't lead. You have a man who can't find his way off a stage after he makes a speech that lasts for about 2 minutes. Now, I think bedlam is Joe Biden. I think that he's using this. This is just a political ploy.
A new surge of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border is overwhelming already stretched resources and prompting urgent talks with Mexican officials as December border crossings reached a record monthly high. Border authorities encountered more than 225,000 migrants along the U.S.-Mexico border this month, marking the highest monthly total recorded since 2000, according to preliminary Homeland Security statistics shared with CNN. Over the course of the month, authorities dealt with more than 10,000 migrants crossing daily until more recently, when the numbers began to drop.
John, Ellen, well, it is a completely different picture here from what we've seen this time last week, where these fences behind me were flooded with migrants waiting to be processed. And now you can see that there is not a single one waiting here between these fences. However, over the past few hours, I did see dozens of migrants come over that fence behind me and escorted away by agents. Now, on top of the numbers that you mentioned, CBP sources tell Fox News that the border sector in this part of Texas encountered more than 2,000 migrants in the last 24 hours. Some migrants coming into Eagle Pass have been sent to processing facilities. I spoke with one woman named Monica near a shelter who traveled to the United States from Ecuador with her daughter. She says the journey to get here involving crossing through rivers and a jungle. At one point, she did not eat for 3 days.
Democrats are reluctantly standing behind President Biden as their party's 2024 nominee because they feel like there's no other choice, a Washington Post report found. President Biden officially announced that he and Vice President Harris would seek re-election in a video released early Tuesday morning, despite a lack of support from Democratic voters.
And Maria, the president's going to have the first part of his campaign fall back on fighting for democracy. He's going to say that Republicans in this first part want to take away your freedoms.
I ran for president 4 years ago. I said we're in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are. The question we're facing is whether in the years ahead we have more freedom or less freedom, more rights or fewer. I know what I want the answer to be, and I think you do too. This is not a time to be complacent.
So the president, a little superstitious 4 years ago today, he also released a video message that he would run for president. Now, former President Donald Trump, talking in an interview last night, addressed the re-election bid by President Biden, saying this country is in trouble. We're going to end up in World War III. They're talking nuclear weapons, and we have somebody that doesn't understand what's happening. Republican Greg Murphy told you, Maria, yesterday, this is elder abuse.
Democrats in battleground states vented to the paper that Biden's age and his unfulfilled promises were draining their excitement for the incumbent's re-election bid. Across a wide range of demographic and ideological groups that make up the Democratic coalition, the reactions revealed a party accepting Biden as its standard-bearer, but only reluctantly, the report stated. They are lukewarm about picking Biden as their nominee, but many believe he may be the best hope of preventing a second Trump term and fighting extremism.
I don't mean to rag on the President of the United States, but honestly, he's acting like a retiree. It's been reported that over 40% of Joe Biden's presidency has been spent on vacation. And I think a lot of Americans, including Gen Z, don't want a president who seems more like he's retired the next 4 years after 2024.
Let's get into the numbers with Ryan here. And a Monmouth University poll, 76% think Joe Biden is too old to effectively serve another term. And when it comes to the young people, people like you guys, in a New York Times poll released on Tuesday, 49% of voters age 18 to 29 support Trump versus Joe Biden's 43%.
Voters of all ages said they worried about Biden's mental fitness as the oldest president in history. He is a crazy person and does unconscious things. He is ruining our country and our nation. First off, a majority of Democrats do think Joe Biden ought to run for re-election, which he is doing, but it's not a huge majority. More than a third of Democrats don't think he should run, and some Democrats have been voicing this doubt for a while.
Obviously, a lot of attention on 2024 now that the votes have been cast in the midterms. 2/3 of Americans in exit polls say that they don't think you should run for re-election. What is your message to them, and how does that factor into your final decision about whether or not to run for re-election?
It doesn't.
What's your message to them? To those 2/3 of Americans?
Watch me.
Okay, one more. Very quickly, we saw Governor Ron DeSantis with a resounding victory in Florida last night. Who do you think would be the tougher competitor, Ron DeSantis or former President Trump, and how is that factoring into your decision?
It'll be fun watching them take on each other. All right, David Sanger.
Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson still won't admit that Joe Biden won the 2020 election, even as he called suggestions that he was an election denier nonsense. The comments came in an interview with CBS's Margaret Brennan that aired Sunday morning, in which she asked the Speaker, who is second in line to the presidency, whether he'd affirm that Biden defeated Donald Trump in 2020. President Biden was certified as the winner of the election. He took the oath of office. He's been the president for 3 years, Johnson told Brennan, while repeatedly maintaining that the Constitution was clearly violated during the election.
This is water under under the bridge. I mean, when the Supreme Court it passed on the Texas litigation and did not address the issue, I believe in the rule of law. This is our system. We move forward. I work with President Biden as the President of the United States. I'm trying very hard to ensure that he is only a one-termer, because I believe he has been an abject failure as the Commander-in-Chief of our country. And I think on every metric of public policy, that is objectively true. In fact, I'm not sure that there's anything the administration could point to as a real success. And so I think that he will be a one-term president. But you know, this discussion about what happened in 2020 is yesterday's news.
I want to ask you, though, because a majority of House Republicans voted to authorize an impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden recently. What do you think he should be impeached for, and how do you negotiate with him in the process of that impeachment?
The House has
potential impeachment.
Among the very heavy responsibilities that the House of Representatives holds, next to the declaration of war, impeachment is probably the heaviest power that we have. In the previous administration, we were very critical of the House Democrats because they politicized impeachment. They used it for raw partisan purposes, in my view.
The Constitution was violated in the run-up to the 2020 election. Not always in bad faith, but in the aftermath of COVID, many states changed their election laws in ways that violated that plain language, Johnson argued. That's just a fact. After weeks of GOP infighting led to Johnson's surprise election to the top House job in October, the newly minted Speaker's leading behind-the-scenes role in the sprawling legal attempts to halt Biden's victory became an object of intense public scrutiny in the media. Johnson, a constitutional lawyer, had helped collect signatures from more than 60% of House Republicans for an amicus brief supporting a Texas lawsuit claiming widespread election irregularities without evidence. The suit sought to have results voided in 4 crucial states. In his Sunday interview, Brennan presented Johnson with comments from Liz Cheney's new book, in which the former South Dakota representative argued Johnson had played a destructive role in the aftermath of the election. It became clear that Mike was being less than honest with our colleagues, Cheney wrote. He was playing bait and switch, assuring members that the brief made no claims about specific allegations of fraud when in fact it was full of such claims.
On his second day on the job, Speaker Mike Johnson continued to dodge questions about his efforts to overturn the 2020 election.
Do you believe the 2020 election was stolen, sir? Just yes or no?
After the election, Johnson, in coordination with then-President Donald Trump, recruited more than 100 Republicans to sign on to a brief supporting a lawsuit to overturn the results. He also promoted conspiracy theories about rigged voting machine software in a radio interview.
When you have, a software system that is used all around the country that is suspect because it came from Hugo Chavez's Venezuela.
Democrats are concerned Johnson could again try to block certification of the Electoral College results next year if President Biden wins again.
His track record with respect to trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election speaks for itself.
Johnson's opponents are also singling out his views on abortion rights.
There is no right to abortion in the Constitution, period.
I don't spend much time responding to Liz Cheney's criticism these days, Johnson replied. She worked with the Democrats on the January 6th Select Committee to make all of this even more politicized than it was. The Louisiana Republican went on to claim that he and Cheney were in constant dialogue about the amicus brief and that, at one point, she even considered signing it. Cheney's book offers a different version of events.
Democracy is messy sometimes, but it is our system. This conference that you see, this House Republican majority, is united. I'm honored to have the support of my colleagues, and what they understand about this is servant leadership. We're going to serve the people of this country. This group here is ready to govern, and we're going to govern well. We're going to do what's right by the people. And I believe the people are going to reward that next year. But we have a lot of big priorities ahead of us right now. The world is on fire. We stand with our ally, Israel.
Brennan pressed the speaker on how he could possibly work with the president if he didn't believe the 2020 election passed constitutional muster. "This is water under the bridge," Johnson replied. "I work with President Biden as the President of the United States. I'm trying very hard to ensure that he is only a one-termer, because I believe he has been an abject failure as the commander-in-chief of our country. Trump is also against Biden and his problems with migration to our country."
Draw, baby, draw. We're going to seal up the border. Because right now we have an invasion. We have an invasion of millions and millions of people that are coming into our country. I can't imagine why they think that's a good thing. It's a very bad thing. I think it's a group of people that are probably larger in number than New York State. And we can't have that. We can't have that. It's not sustainable as a country. It's horrible. And you know, they're coming from prisons and jails. They're coming from all over. They're coming from countries that most people have never heard of. And they're coming from mental institutions and insane asylums. They're being emptied out into our country. And they're terrorists. Many terrorists are coming in. You know, in 2019, I saw just recently on a poll, they had none in 2019, no terrorists. Now, I even say there's got to be some, but they have none.
Immigration, one of the most politically divisive and complex matters in the U.S. for decades, is emerging as a top issue in the 2024 election. Look no further than Iowa and New Hampshire, two early voting states, thousands of miles from the southwest border. Voters there ranked immigration nearly as important as the economy when asked which issue mattered most in deciding how to vote in the Republican presidential contests. I think overall the most important thing to me is securing the borders, national security. Bill Collins of Bedford, New Hampshire, told ABC News at a polling place on Tuesday.
As the crisis at the southern border has turned into a turf war between state and federal officials, the Biden administration says 3 migrants drowned after Texas National Guard members physically blocked federal border agents from attempting to rescue them. Our Weijia Zhang reports this dispute is adding more fuel to the fire.
The Texas National Guard abruptly seized control of a 2.5-mile stretch of the southern border last week. DHS says on Friday, federal border protection agents requested access to the area, where a group of migrants was attempting to cross the Rio Grande, but Texas officials refused. A woman and her 2 children drowned. In a cease and desist letter to the Texas Attorney General, the top lawyer for DHS said Texas's failure to provide access to the border persists, even in instances of imminent danger to life and safety.
Border security was a centerpiece of Donald Trump's successful 2016 campaign, and he is now repeating those messages and in many cases going further than he did 8 years ago. Accused of echoing Hitler in saying immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, to energize and unite his supporters against what Republicans have dubbed Biden's border crisis.
Joe Biden has launched an illegal foreign invasion of our country, allowing a record number of illegal aliens to storm across our borders. From all over the world they came. Under Biden's current policies, even though these millions of illegal border crossers have entered the country unlawfully, all of their future children will become automatic U.S. citizens. Can you imagine? They'll be eligible for welfare, taxpayer-funded health care, the right to vote, chain migration, and countless other government benefits, many of which will also profit the illegal alien parents. This policy is a reward for breaking the laws of the United States and is obviously they come from mental institutions, they come from jails, prisoners, some of the toughest, meanest people you'll ever see. The United States is among the only countries in the world that says that even if neither parent is a citizen nor even lawfully in the country, their future children are automatic citizens the moment the parents trespass onto our soil. As has been laid out by many scholars, this current policy is based on a historical myth and a willful misinterpretation of the law by the open borders advocates.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden is facing rancor within his own party as Democratic leaders in New York and Illinois forced to deal with the fallout from busloads of migrants being sent to their cities by Texas GOP Governor Greg Abbott amid a historic influx of border crossings. In his entire administration, it has eclipsed everything else, said Muzaffar Chishti, a senior fellow at the Nonpartisan Migration Policy Institute. Migrant encounters at the U.S.-Mexico border reached a record high of 302,000 in December, and apprehensions hit historic peak of 2.2 million in fiscal year 2022. Over 100,000 migrants have been transported to cities like Washington, Los Angeles, and New York. Images of migrants lining the streets in Manhattan or Chicago helped shift perceptions of the issue from a faraway problem to a daily close reminder of border tumult, making it even more potent than in prior cycles. This is where it's different from any other chapter in our history, Chishti said.
Well, look, that's a decision they're going to have to make, but I think the results in Iowa were compelling. President Trump won over 51% of the vote. He won 98 counties of the 99. It was a dominant result, and at this point, I don't see a path for any other candidate. I think he's clear he's going to be the nominee, and so I think it's time for the party to unite and to focus on what matters, which is winning in November, beating Joe Biden. This country is on disastrously the wrong path. And I think the consequences of that are enormous.
Who do you think should be Trump's vice president? Do you have any advice to give?
Well, I have no idea. I don't know who he's going to pick, and I don't know that he does at this point. I think he'll go through this process, and I imagine we'll get an announcement right about the time of the convention is typically when it happens, and so it's probably a little premature for him to make that decision.
When you have an organic absorption of migrants in society, it doesn't get noticed. But when you have sudden, dramatic groups of people showing up, then it becomes a different kind of problem, Chishti added. Polls show immigration is a major political vulnerability for Biden. He has just an 18% approval rating on the issue, the lowest for any president since ABC News, and the Washington Post began asking the question in January 2004. An ABC News Ipsos survey conducted last November, 1 year out from Election Day, showed Republicans were generally more trusted to do a better job than Democrats when it came to handling immigration. At the same time, nearly a third of U.S. adults said they didn't trust either party to effectively deal with the issue. Biden campaigned as Trump's foil on immigration, promising to put an end to controversial policies like those that led to families being separated at the border. Shortly after he entered office, he sent a bill to Congress, he said, to restore humanity and American values to our immigration system.
These 500 plus kids came with parents. They separated them at the border to make it a disincentive to come to begin with. They real tough, we're really strong. And guess what? They cannot, it's not coyotes didn't bring them over, their parents were with them. They got separated from their parents. And it makes us a laughing stock and violates every notion of who we are as a nation.
Let me ask you a follow-up
Kristen,
question.
they did it. We changed the policy.
Your response
they
to
did
that?
It. We changed.
did not.
They built the
separate
cages.
They,
who built the cages, Joe?
Let's talk about what
who
we're
built
talking
the cages,
about.
Joe?
Let's talk about what we're talking about. What happened? Parents were ripped. Their kids were ripped from their arms and separated. And now they cannot find over 500 sets of those parents, and those kids are alone. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. It's criminal. It's criminal.
Let me.
Biden's apparent shift appears appeals to moderates and independents in the electorate but does risk alienating more progressive members of the party, said Louis DeCipio, a political science and Chicano-Latino professor at UC Irvine. Biden's on a tightrope with this issue, DeCipio said. It's the first time in quite a while that Democrats have had this level of internal division over immigration. It is important to remember that under Trump's rule, there were no such migration problems in America. Don't forget to comment on this video and watch other shocking news on the channel.